Hey, this is Rob with Old Guy Tech TV, Opinion versus Pinion for April 16, 2014. And with me today, of course, is Jonathan Cherney, John Manajastic, and we're here to talk about all kinds of issues. And listen, if you want to call in and discuss something that you may be interested in, 530-621-1210 is the call-in number. Feel free to please call in. We'll be glad to take your phone call. And also, don't forget, we run on donations, so we really do need your help. John, you want to start off with talking about taxes? Yesterday was April 15th, and of course, we all had to hurry and get our taxes in. Why don't we start with taxes?
Or not. You know,
or
here's
not.
the thing.
Yeah.
By the way, when we talk about donations, obviously I have found a separate donation stream and moved from my rather middle-class bedroom in Northridge to a penthouse apartment.
There you go, huh?
Downtown Los Angeles.
It's a great-looking picture.
Yeah, you want pictures? We got pictures over here. I was sharing with Rob before we came on. It has always struck me as an irony that we somehow chose April the 15th as the day that our federal taxes are due, unless it's a Sunday. And it just happens to be the day that Abraham Lincoln died. He was assassinated, or the shooting happened on the evening of April the 14th, and he ended his life on the 15th.
On the 15th.
And to many people, April the 15th is a life ender. And we have a problem here. And we could save a whole lot of money and collect a whole lot more money a whole lot more quickly if the federal government would just do the returns of the people that have withholding tax taken out of their income. And they just send you in the mail your 1040 or your 1040EZ, prepared by them based on the numbers that they got for your W4E of your what was withheld from your paycheck during the taxable year, and based on what they know and the information that's been gathered, this is what your taxes are. In most cases of people on a 1040 or a 1040EZ, it would be correct. And it would also not take very long to verify that they had it correct. For people with much more involved tax returns, they use their professional filer. They do it themselves. And we actually had a pilot program doing this in California some years ago with a 98% positive rating by those that participated. Yeah. For the majority of people, we put on an undue level of stress, an undue level of fear, and the reason why we have is because H&R Block and Intuit have made a very nice financial position for themselves preparing taxes. One of the things I will mention, I went into an H&R Block office because I wasn't sure I was doing it right. My net result wasn't coming out the way I thought when I did my taxes. So I had them do it. But before they even did it, I said, how much? And the woman looked at me and went, $340.
Wow.
For a 1040EZ.
Did you try it online?
Oh, no, I had done it online as well, through Intuit.
Because it stands for easy money. Holy crap.
Before I went any further, I said, no way, Jose, thank you so very much. I'm walking out of here. Oh, but, and I'm going, no. And herein lies the problem. H&R Block and Intuit make zounds of bounds. You know what they do is you file. Suppose you're getting $1,000 tax back. They'll just take the $300 out of the tax refund.
Right. If you let them.
Right. If you allow them. And here is an issue where it's not a huge and it's not a year-round occupation. It's a part-time job doing taxes, unless you're an accountant or a financial advisor. For those people who really, can take advantage of the depth and the breadth of the tax code to avoid, but not evade any taxes that they don't need to pay. The majority of taxpayers don't fall into that category. If the federal government would send you the prepared 1040 based on what they knew, you don't have to file it. You have the option of throwing it away, doing it yourself, going to H&R Block, or using Intuit TurboTax to do your taxes. But all in all, I believe it would make things much quicker, much easier, and bottom line, much less stressful. I mean, I went through that for years, being an insurance guy, and when people, and which post office is open till midnight now, because it's not all of them. There are specific ones. It would expedite things on so many different levels if we did that, rather than going through this Chris mania. April the 15th would be just a regular day in the year. Other Western countries do that. They prepare the taxes and send it to people. Same option. If you don't want to have them done by the government, then you do them. Or you can verify it and sign it and send it back.
What always struck me as interesting is that it seems to me that any time you pick one day that you want everything to be done, you're absolutely inundated, and there's no way that you're going to be able to process that large a quantity in that given day. So
Right.
it would be interesting if we experimented with doing taxes on an individual's calendar year, whatever they picked, and they had to file by that particular day. And I think that would even out the workflow. One of the issues that happens all the time to me because of a particular stock I have, they don't report out until after the 15th, so I always have to file an extension. And other people are the same way. And and then I must say, I had an opportunity.
I'm sorry, as a stockholder, you guys as stockholders couldn't say to them, look, you've got to issue this before we do taxes.
We've tried, and
money.
Yeah, I know. We won't get into that. It's a long story, but it has to do with their accounting year, and it's different. So anyway, also I had an opportunity to help a family member do his taxes online, and we have for the last 4 years used H&R Block. And the interesting thing with that is a bit like you were talking about, is that since he's got a 3 or 4 year record with them, we pop in, we pay our $89, everything's basically filled out, you look at what they say, they know who you work for, if you change jobs, whatever, and for $89 they file electronically both the state and federal. The returns can either be electronic, credit card, or check, whatever you wish.
I like the credit card thing. That's pretty
yeah,
cool.
the credit card thing was great. That's the first time they offered it this year. They give you a credit card loaded with your refund money, and you go spend it like a MasterCard or whatever, and off you go.
Minus a percentage, yes?
No percentage.
Refund?
No, they took it that it was free, offered free this year.
The $89
covered it.
I would have paid that happily.
Yeah.
But when she hit me with $340.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the difference between walking into an office and just doing it yourself online.
No. I walked into an office and she said $340 to do your easy.
Wow.
Well, I can tell you, I just did it yesterday. $89 for both online H&R Block.
Oh yeah. No, this was Block, different place, different.
Right.
They'll take what they can get, but they start high. Now that you have 3 years, I mean, these people keep calling me back. Mm-hmm. I ain't coming back. Not for that kind of money. And we know last year's tax return, if I would have paid anybody to do it, you would have handed me one of your guns.
Exactly. Sometimes you don't always have to send.
Why did you, you might as well do this because they must not be working if you paid somebody to do that. So there you go.
There you go.
It has been tried in California, and I don't remember the period, and it may have been just with the California tax, but it was certainly, the IRS is under all. But it's stupid that we all go through trying to get it in by midnight.
Exactly. I agree.
When for probably easily 50% of the population, and things like earned tax credit, all that kind of stuff is done.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a question. The problem of it is that Block, and I mean Intuit, after the pilot program 10 years ago here in California, spent $10 million in opposition to it going into effect as a law. And it's,
Nothing like lobbying,
it's just
huh?
another example of
Yep.
self-interest.
Yeah.
I had a friend that for years worked for an accounting firm. Well, it was owned by H&R Block, is who she basically worked for. And just one day, after many years with them, and a lead manager, and being put in a program that out of Chicago that prepares accountants to be partners. They came in one day and said, so long and thanks for all the fish.
Wow.
And she's doing as well, if not better, but went through probably 2 to 3 months of shock.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a total of 6 months to maybe 7 months of unemployment. I have, be that as it may. But think about that. I think you're going to hear more about that in future. You're going to hear more, it's big problems if you don't have us do it. Now, if I could drop it off to somebody and have it done for $89, of course, right now, that would have been too much. I wouldn't think much of it for less than $100. Sure, take the money, fine, not a problem.
Right.
But
Well,
when they
and again, I think these H&R Block's offices, all the open offices, they charge more because you've got people that are not computer literate, people that might have more complicated taxes. I mean, that you might want an accountant type person to look at it and that type of thing. And I think, frankly, if you did have a more complicated tax situation, $350 is not bad. But when you're talking about an easy form, that's just
a 1040.
Yeah, that's
it's
just
not that big a deal.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's
so
whether
easy.
you itemize deductions or not. And I found out that because I actually did them with a friend on TurboTax.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know or don't know, I've had a mailing address that's been the same for over 27 years. It's my mailing address. I didn't think about it. They didn't ask any questions, and I have to talk to the state of California in my own case because we filed it under my mailing address, which is a business. So when it came to the renter's deduction in the state of California, I didn't qualify. I didn't realize that until this year.
Interesting.
When I sat with her and went, oh, that's going to make some difference. So I have to contact state of California and say, oops, made a mistake. Now, they have 10 years, 12 years, state of California can go back on you to see it, but I don't know how much time I have as the taxpayer to say, oops, I made a mistake, can we fix it?
Yeah, well.
In the state of California, people, if you're watching out of state,
yeah.
Once they got your money, getting it back, nah.
Well, good for those states out there that actually don't have state taxes. That's pretty cool.
They don't have our population.
Well, they don't. You're right. They don't.
We still are the 7th largest economy in the world, the state of California.
Love it or hate it, it is. Nah, so it'll stay that way for quite a while.
It was 6th.
Yeah.
But
anyway, I agree with John. I think we need to make it easier for people to file their taxes, and maybe more people will file. I personally like the idea of, hey, choose your year end, whatever you want to report on. I think that would make everything easier. I think there's all kinds of ways of getting off something that we've been doing so ingrained for so long, and I think that's part of the problem. Well, we know government, they don't like to change a whole lot, and then when they do, they usually screw it up.
If you make it on a specific day,
yeah,
they just make it crazy because procrastination is an art.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, and nobody wants to do anything they have to pay for until right before they have to pay for it. Unless you have, unless money's involved, like it is for you, attorney.
Just let your attorney do it. That's no.
So the question is, do you actually think it would?
Them quarterly checks, and we'll see if they're right at the end of the year.
Exactly.
Anyway.
What was that, Jonathan?
Do you actually think that, that say if some legislator wants to do it, do you think the special interest would let them change it?
Oh, I think it might be a fight. It depends on how it's done. And as John and I have always said, follow the money. And
at the end of the day, it's all whether the public wants to, and right now, for any number of reasons that we could argue about, the public doesn't think the IRS is very credible.
Anybody out there that want to comment on this or about to switch topics? 621-1210. Do you have a tax issue? Do you have something that we may not have heard of? Kind of an interesting topic.
Always had a tax issue, and it has never been the amount I have paid. It's
Yeah.
how they're spent after I pay them. I would like to self-direct my tax revenue to satisfy
what you
the
want.
demands
Yes,
of
I see.
funding.
I think it's an easy solution. Let's go back to a part-time legislation and legislators, and I think we can lower the expense in the state of California by quite a bit.
Hey, what's that?
Not
I
only-
hear politicians laughing at that idea.
Not only in the state of California, but we could do it nationally.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
you know, when the Congress walks in and says we're gonna work 119 days this year, my response is you could do that from home.
Yeah.
We have the internet, we have computers, we don't need the fancy chairs with the plaques in the offices, and you can have secretarial staff. That can be paid for, but you don't need to be here and be vulnerable to K Street lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Go home
Yeah.
and do your congressional job and be in contact, and people come to your office every day. You can vote. We can, we can do that virtually. And that's one of the things that came up, that what the new head of HP, was it another woman?
Yes.
From a company that used to have, you can work at home, everybody has to show up.
Oh, that's the you're talking about Yahoo, and that's the Marissa Mayer, the former Googler.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you have a question, comment, or hey, do you think one of us is full of it? Give us a call at 530-621-1210. That's 530-621-1210.
That was interesting that she did that. You'd think this day and age you would continue to want to telecommunicate or
I think
I lost the words.
The telecommunicate. I think
Yeah.
there's a reason why. It's hard to create a unified company when everybody's spread out over the world. I think what it is try to cut. You can cut expenditures, watch employees a little bit, and when you start getting more revenue, you can start letting people.
Well, you know what?
telecommunicate.
It's called the water cooler syndrome, okay? What happens is when you have people spread out in a company that all over the place, you don't have the opportunity for the people to share information and ideas face to face. And I've heard this and seen this in many different companies. Some go with the theory, some don't go with the theory. I think it's kind of interesting that these companies like Yahoo and all the green, Googles and all these green companies, they want to reduce their carbon footprint, and now they're requiring their workers to all drive or take something into their office every day, and it's a little bit against what they wanted to initially stand for, but. Yeah,
Do you
so
realize that we have decreased our carbon output by 50%, and we are halfway to the 2020 goal?
That's what
It's
happens
good.
when you have a mass amount of unemployment.
might be part of it.
No, that would more have to do with gas at $4.30 a gallon.
Well, yes.
So you got both issues.
I-
I'm
Yeah.
trying to be a little bit funny, but I do think unemployment plays a part of it. But I think gas prices pay more.
Yeah,
It's a little bit. I'll totally agree on that one.
hey, you've been watching gas prices? There's a topic we didn't even
Have
start to
you
talk
been
about.
Have you been watching their correlation to spring break?
Yeah, but the other issue that people aren't talking about a whole lot, heard every now and then. Look
Spring.
what's going on in Russia
Oh, yeah.
and Ukraine. And where does a lot of the fuel in the Eastern Bloc flow through, and where does it go, and who does it affect? Yeah.
United Socialistic.
Germany says, guess what? We're not going to pay you.
Yeah.
United was
That was part of the reason for Putin going into the Ukraine owned the Soviet Union for natural gas.
I think
money.
the USSR is making a comeback. Different name, same face.
If you consider going through with a blitzkrieg and claiming territory that's sovereign to individual nations,
Well, but
a comeback of the USSR.
I think,
Yes.
but here's some of the pundits I've listened to said they're not that the territory belonged to Mother Russia at one point. We're just reclaiming it. So
But
don't forget-
Russia has the same.
You have a language barrier situation in that country as well. I mean, you do have Russian speaking Ukrainians, and then you have the others. And so what you're finding is
They
there's a bit of
understand things.
they're very, it's a little bit like Canada. It's like the English-speaking Canadians and the French-speaking Canadians, they hate each other.
The Quebecois.
I mean, and this is no different. This is a situation just like it.
So, ladies
Well,
and
you have that throughout Europe. It's always been an issue. It's been a quote unquote excuse or reason for invasion. Well, there are people there that speak German, which is part of the reason for World War One. The borders are so close and so mixed in Europe. Most people in Europe speak more than one language.
well, they have to because I think they're so close to each other. Unlike the United States was extremely insulated from other countries.
Well, yeah, and to keep your sovereignty, I mean, your language is your culture. So to keep your sovereignty, you speak the native language of the area. I don't know that,
Hey, Michael Savage is right. Border language and culture.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's it. It's all
Sorry.
theories. Watch the gas prices. They're jumping up. I don't know how long they're going to stay that way. Hopefully, they'll go
And we
down.
are coming on summer. So,
Yeah.
Labor Day's really not that far away, folks.
Unfortunately,
45 days.
I think if I remember correctly, I think the summer blend is
Memorial
cheaper.
Day, sorry, I always mess those up.
Wait, if I remember correctly, I think the summer blend is cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should be dropping, and this is for California. If there's anybody actually watching outside of California, California has multiple grades depending on season. One is more expensive than the other.
Anyway, since we've gone down the down
Damn,
the rabbit
that was
hole
cold.
of gasoline prices and what's going on there, let's just talk a little bit about the Nevada situation.
Ooh, I actually have something about that too.
Oh, okay. That has been going on. And I spent a little time investigating this, and I know John and Jonathan are both as well. And what is that, Jonathan?
I found a small infographic on the amount of land owned by the federal government.
Is this just for Nevada? Because
No, this is for parts of this is for like the western states.
Okay.
I can go through it after once you get to that if you
all
want.
right, let's do that. But it's like 80% of Nevada is owned by the federal government.
81.1.
That was pretty good. Yeah. Anyway, so we had this showdown in Nevada in which this rancher by the name of Bundy has stated,
Ted?
and you can argue his case either way, about grazing his cattle on BLM land. But it's interesting as I start studying the issues, and I don't know if I want to point fingers or not, but some of the articles are pointing to that it's kind of an underhanded deal involving some corporations.
It is
Can you
kind of what we
imagine
do,
that?
point fingers.
Can you imagine something like that? And a corporation might actually have something to do with what was going on there. Now, a lot of patriots got all upset, and they decided that they were...
Before you get up into fantasy land,
Yeah.
corporation has nothing to do with it. They sent a letter to the state of Nevada a year and a half ago saying that it's not economically viable to build the solar farm because they don't have people to buy the electricity. They're out of the deal.
Right. But
Yes,
what you're
we
missing,
can
the point you're missing, sir, is
Yes.
the individuals that are lining their pocket, and who are they? Doesn't matter if the land deal goes through or not. It doesn't matter.
It's not going through.
I can tell you right now. Guess who Harry Reid's son works for?
Right. The
Okay.
company is not going to put a solar farm on Bundy's land.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think? Give us a call, 530-621-1210.
Then there's nothing to think. Your father and I are having an argument. There's no fact to hang that on. Says yes.
It doesn't
I say no.
stop people from calling and giving their opinion.
And then of course, there was the other idea that, people have been throwing all kinds of crazy ideas that some black ops military companies want the land to manufacture whatever military material they seem to think that land holds, and they wanted to build that, and that's not true.
Back to the basic fact, and this goes back to when I used to go to Colorado with our dear friend we can't find anymore, and go up camping on the open range. Farmers have a responsibility to the federal government to pay for the use of the open range. It's not a lot of money.
Here's
Now,
my
this guy's
question.
gone over 20 years without paying the money, and it's accumulated to a seven-figure amount.
Well, here-
1.3 million.
Well, here-
Farmers and ranchers pay the fee.
Well, here's something I did read, and I don't know where I found it, but he did say that he was paying the fees to Nevada, and then Nevada just stopped collecting the fees according to the article. What I don't know is if they sent him a letter saying sent here. I think
Now,
the other
reason-
thing
the
is
reason
saying.
he did-
I was going to say the other thing I think honestly I think it should be looked at is the guy's been on had been on that property before Nevada was a state.
Right.
Well,
his family had been on the property before Nevada was a state.
Well, I
Does
guess-
you know when Nevada became a state, Jonathan? This guy'd have to be pretty old.
Yeah, but having talked to an attorney about presumptive land rights is an interesting argument, and that's one I think that's going to come up in this a little bit more that's been ignored. Now, listen, folks, there's all kinds of reasons to get upset and not like the government and whatever. Hold on, John. Let me get this through. Hold on, John. Let me get this through.
1864
All right. 1864
is when they became a state.
The thing is that we don't want to overreact
That was wrong.
on these situations, and I think we had a spark that got a number of militia groups and other patriotic groups. They all of a sudden stood up and wanted to gather, and we became within a hair's breadth of a shooting situation. And thank God the government backed down. Cooler heads prevailed, and that stopped. Let's look at this thing logically and see what this is really all about. John is right. There is grazing fees that BLM collects from anybody that lets their cattle graze on BLM land. California is full of that. We have in El Dorado County, in our forest up there, many ranchers graze up there, and they pay something as little as 2 or 3 cents a head to graze in the forests. It's very little. It really is.
But a guy like John Harris at Harris Ranch and if you travel back and forth between the canyons, between the Central Valley and the coast, the majority of the Harris Ranch beef is grazed there and then fattened up at the feedlot on Highway 5.
Right. Yeah, it's the whole issue. It just strikes me very interesting is that not everybody, the people that really didn't look at the information, they got their hackles up over it. And I'm as frustrated as anybody about some of the stuff that's going on in California. But this is not the spark, guys. Yeah, I believe in property rights. I believe in, there's a lot of things. And like I said, this should be just settled in the courts. It shouldn't be a shooting war.
I think
it's got to be just relaxed a little bit.
I think the thing that you guys are completely 100% missing is I don't think it was necessarily about the grazing rights. I think a lot of people I was reading was the fact the government owns land and it owns 80%.
So what?
Well, the problem is they're not legally allowed to unless, if I remember correctly, unless Congress approves it. And this is what the argument I've heard, because the government owns 81% of Nevada, 66% of Utah, 61% of Alaska, 61% of Idaho, 53% of Oregon, 48% of Wyoming, 47% of California. I think part of the problem is everybody's saying is, why does the government own this much land?
I have an answer for you.
They don't have the right to.
I have an answer, and I don't know that argument is correct. I can tell you what they have.
Don't they have a right to, John?
Yeah. Listen, what it is most of the land that BLM is on is land that is either national parks, national states, and stuff that can't be used for anything. I mean, there's a lot of, in every one of these states, there's a lot of property where it can't be developed, it can't be worked, you can't put a business on it, and the BLM owns that land. I mean, that's the reality of it.
I don't know since when, but it has been that way since, we opened up the Western Territory that the government took eminent domain over. They owned it, and so they sold it, or they gave it away.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Here's something I thought was interesting from a website called Biz Pack Review. Never heard of it. Take it as you may. It says many Western states were treated unequally when they joined the Union. Unlike Eastern states, Congress reserved vast amounts of federally owned land in the Enabling Acts for statehood in the West. Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution requires an act of Congress to create a state. Keeping the majority of the land federally controlled seems to conflict with the very concept of statehood. The second paragraph of Section 4 appears to authorize this bizarre practice on close inspection that is far from clear.
Okay, which meant it's unclear. And really, Jonathan, the reason why there was a confrontation in Nevada is the BLM had confiscated 400 of this man's cattle in lieu of payment.
I think the
And where
problem.
the confrontation came was the BLM folks said, what's the gentleman's last name?
Bundy.
That we want to speak to Mr. Bundy and his son, okay, about the 400 and the amount of the fees. I watched it on, there's a viral video on,
Yeah, they tased his son.
no,
Yeah, they actually
Yeah,
they did.
well, that may have happened, but in the confrontation where there were 300 people and the BLM agents, and the BLM agents backed down and gave him back the 400 confiscated head of cattle.
I do.
And that's where the range war tension came when the BLM said, "You owe us the money." The court and Bundy had been evicted some years ago, and they said, "Look, if you're not going to pay us, this has been going on, I think, since mid '80s." They says that the BLM is not entitled to
90s.
payment because it's Nevada's land, and that that his family. In the articles I read said 1880. If it became a state in 1864, something happened between the two. But the fact of the matter is, we can't have, or we don't have in the United States unclaimed land. It either belongs to private property owners or belongs to the government.
Right. It's somebody's got to own it. I really think it's interesting how this flared up over this issue. Property rights was essentially the idea behind it, and nobody wants their property taken away. And eminent domain is a big argument with everybody in every state.
Because in California, it's been used very poorly in
Well,
the past 10
correct.
years.
There have been some decisions that you could say are very poor. I agree, but I don't know. I don't think this whole issue fits what we're looking for. I think people overreacted on this, and I do believe. I hate to say this. I'm going to finish the statement. I do believe that money is owed to the government for this, and in some
Until they knock on your
respects,
door
the
and ask
guy
for
at
it.
this point maybe he doesn't have the money. I don't know what it was, but I do know that
it's a lot of money now.
yeah,
It's 1.1 million.
Yeah, so but when somebody takes your cattle, and that's his livelihood, I understand why he got upset, and I understand why some of the other ranchers got upset too. But I think
What other ranchers?
I think this whole thing, to be honest with you, belongs in the court and not not at the barrel of a gun.
Well,
this is not the one.
I think the problem, part of the problem is the way BLM showed up with armed guards, dogs, weapons, and then they established I think the way they handled this was poor because they basically had armed guards, and then something happened and they tased and arrested his son. The problem is part of the screw up was on BLM.
Okay,
part
so,
of it was on
So
him.
you're right. I think something happened in the beginning that sparked this whole thing. And law enforcement doesn't always act nice when they come to take something from you.
Yeah, the problem is law enforcement was going to get killed by the amount of. Here's the issue. The other issue, I really think is. Have any of you guys actually heard interviews with this cat? Have any of you?
Oh yeah.
He's a hardcore constitutional fundamentalist, which you can't really be in the United States anymore. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I understand his position, and I think
you have to realize that a hardcore constitutionalist to you might be a complete wacko to me, because we see the Constitution very differently, Jonathan.
Well, I mean, he well, I don't disagree, but especially in certain ones, what I'm saying is he's hardcore. He's like, this is what the Constitution says.
Because
this
he says that the deal is between him and the state of Nevada going back to his family being on the land and using those lands before it was a state.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the problem is it's, according to this, it's not really between him and the state. It's between him and the federal government. And, that's part of it, is his comment was...
him and the federal government, because
Right.
he's on BLM land.
so. I personally believe that this whole thing could have been handled in a different manner in the beginning, and when none of this would have happened. I think it was some poor decision on law enforcement's sake and how they did it. And then we got some very big hotheads out there that jumped on this thing that shouldn't have jumped on this thing. And I really believe this should have been a civil matter, and I don't think this is the one that all those militias and patriot zealots out there want to gather up and start shooting. I'm glad none of that happened.
I have the feeling that Harry Reid and his son are involved in this.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But not in the way you think they're involved with this. I think this is personal between him and Bundy. Reid's family, we have to go back to the fact that Harry Reid's mother's job was
Hooker.
She was a madam.
She was
You
a
have
lady of
managers-
ill repute.
You have managers, and you have employees. She was a manager.
You just
She
have to
ran
pay
a
enough.
house.
So
Okay?
one of the
So
things,
when you take a look at that, I will bet you, and the Reid family was one of the founding families of the state of Nevada. I'll bet you so were the Bundys. I think some of this is interpersonal. As to the Chinese energy company, from everything I can find, they sent a letter to the state
No.
of Nevada some time ago saying, we're not going to do this. We don't want to do this.
yeah, that has nothing to do with energy. The one point that I did find interesting,
No.
for what it,
They were going to build, wait a minute, it does have to do with energy on that land, and why, this is my question, why that particular land, because it's close to Laughlin, that they were going to build a $5 billion solar farm that could produce solar energy for 200,000 homes. That was the engineering projection of the solar farm. And what the outcome was on a cost-benefit analysis when finally done is they could not get contracts with energy companies in the West to buy the energy.
the power.
So why you spend $5 billion for something that nobody wants to buy, or you can't, right, on a business level, that's a bad decision to go ahead and spend $5 billion on something that
Won't work.
you're not going to get paid for.
Yeah, you
Like
can't
the
get anything
like
out
the
here.
Bay Bridge in California. I do think the other thing I thought was interesting is the interview I saw with this guy was saying that
You throw these cheap shots out. What's your problem with the Bay Bridge now? The old Bay Bridge was terribly vulnerable to earthquakes,
so
and it's going to fall down anyway.
so is the new one. What I'm saying.
No,
they're
you're talking about they found some rust, yeah, I've seen what they've said about it. I've got to think either somebody cheated, or again,
Somebody cheated.
my-
There
my
are a number
argument
of
goes back to there-
issues.
We live in an American life of mediocrity, and everything's built to the same level.
How in the world did we get on the Bay Bridge? I wanted to
'cause
finish this story.
I made a cheap shot,
Oh.
and John can't let cheap shots stand. The other issue I heard is, according to the interview I saw with this guy, he said there were 52 individual ranchers around his property, and he said the federal government put them all out of business.
Yeah, I don't know what's true or not. That
This
may
is
be,
from
but
him.
what's that got to do with the fact that he owes the government money? The only thing I
Well,
will
it's,
say,
it's because it's part of his worldview on the fact what he thinks is the government is doing illegal. So you
That's-
can't say it doesn't matter because it's part of the reason why he's doing
I
it.
don't
That's
have enough
great.
information to say it matters or it doesn't, and I don't know if 52 were put out of business or not.
Well,
So-
the reason why I say it
They
matters.
confiscate their cattle,
Well,
which they did to Bundy, which
Yeah.
is when you take somebody's personal property, you got an issue. If I got a gun and you take my property on the open range for a very long period of time, unfortunately, that was a situation handled right then and there. You stole my horses? No, I'm going to catch you and kill you. You steal my cattle, you're a rustling, no good SOB, and I'm going to, and whether it be the federal government or not, I'm a strong believer in personal property rights, and until they have some leg to stand on, which they do legally, it's a very, when you go back to the 1800s, which is the legal basis that Bundy is founded his argument on, you got to kill the fish there. And now the argument that the western states got screwed, and
no, that's not an argument. It's just a fact. But it's just out there. So
Population density was higher on the East Coast than it was on the West Coast.
absolutely,
And
the Indians wouldn't let us in friendly.
But I do think, though, that you can't dismiss his opinion, and whether it's right or wrong.
No, everybody has the right to that opinion. And the only thing I found really interesting out of all this research I did, I took a look at who's the head of the BLM, and it turns out to be a former advisor to guess who?
Obama or Clinton?
Harry Reid.
Oh,
Harry
you
Reid.
surprised
Yeah.
by that?
Well, what
It's
they're saying is
nepotism.
exactly, and Harry Reid is probably apparently very good at getting his friends and family elected to high positions.
It's because what he.
Nevada and Arizona, the western states are like that.
Yeah.
California is the exception. Washington maybe as well.
I mean, it's politics. You pony up a little bit of money. I want my way here, and it's the game of politics.
Now, Rob, I will say to you that the story you had to follow this,
Yeah.
I think is a bellwether that this kind of thing, if not personal, which the whole thing smells in Nevada politics to me that it's gone national because the BLM took the cattle. But the fact of it is that the EPA has taken the attitude, technically, that EPA says it owns all the waterways and water in the United States.
Including
And can
your
do
own.
however it chooses to do.
Which, by the way,
to
also means.
protect-
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me?
I was to say it also means you can't collect rain too. I mean, this is everything.
No. There are some issues about rain collection in California and how it's used, and I think that's kind of stupid. I think but the genesis of what I was going for is the issue of potable water worldwide, with an ever increasing population and an ever decreasing or finite level of potable water. This grab through the EPA, the government agency, to take control of all water, really makes sense that they would do it. Now, are they right? I don't think so. But that they would do it, and this is, already in Australia, they're doing desalination, they're doing Hyperion process that allows them to clean fluid human waste to the point of reconsumption, and it's put back into the system.
ISS does that.
Potable water is an issue worldwide, and this is the first rumblings, because at the end of the day, there's bundy deals over water rights. Grazing land means open streams, etc. Worldwide, it's going to be a huge issue, and I'm not at all surprised that the government is animated and involved with, because, the article I read, somebody wanted to build a house on a piece of property they bought, and they were told they couldn't do that because it was considered a national wetland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they can't sell the property either.
It's
which
been
sucks.
an issue that seems to be in the background a whole lot, and that's why I wanted to bring it forward. And because I think John's right. This is an issue that we're going to return to time after time after time again, because now they're telling me I have a seasonal pond on my property. Okay, it's full in the winter, it's dry in the summer. No, it's just the way it is. Now they're telling me they own my pond, and and it's like, say what? And I think everybody that has their own lakes, their own little streams, their own little ponds, and they maybe mineral springs, whatever it may be, it's on their property, but the government says you don't own it.
Yeah.
Now,
not only.
here's the issue. It is only water above the surface and in quote-unquote waterways. The water table, they do not own. So if you, on your property, have a well, and that well, and you have livestock, etc., so you use that well to fill a pond.
The
on your
pond belongs to
property,
them.
because it makes more sense to hold water than constantly a pump as needed doesn't work for water. So the issue, so my question is, wait a minute, if this pond is created from a well that I dropped and I'm just holding the water here, how in the hell does it belong to you?
Well, I felt the same way about rain.
The law which I read says it doesn't have anything to do with water table or water in the ground, just water on top of the ground.
And that means every water, including rain, which in some counties, I think in some states, it's illegal. Like they'll come and knock over rain barrels. And
Now, California has currently come up with a stupid regulation about collection and use of rainwater.
because it's been in There's people like Ed Begley Jr. and other people who are really in the idea of being, conservation, and the government's telling you can't do that. That's our water. And literally what they're saying.
Yeah, at the moment, if it's water storage and source not, but yeah, I mean, if you had, because that's the question I'm looking for here. If you pump the water, if you spend the money, you drop the well, you spend the energy money to get the water out of the ground. As soon as it comes out of the ground, it becomes the property of the EPA.
My guess is yes.
That's what they're trying to say.
Yeah. So does that mean pool water too? Pool water.
Yeah.
Pool water and ponds and streams.
And the whole reason it's happening, and it's like I said, it's not only happening here, is that we've been very asleep at the switch. And your dad and I go back to a fact where this was an environmental issue of population and overpopulation. We have two countries on the face of the earth with 1 trillion people. Or they're both with the T's. China has given, their one-child deal ain't working too well because you can't tell people how many kids they can and can't have.
I think they just lifted that temporarily. I read something about that.
They did. But the issue of it is third world countries have entirely different population needs. In other words, a family of 7 makes sense if you're a farmer. It doesn't make so much sense if you live in downtown Los Angeles. But when does government get involved in telling you? I mean, the government did in China. They did here sociologically. We've gone to almost a negative growth rate, which is not good, as they're finding out sociologically.
Except for the illegal aliens and other people. I've heard that's one of the reasons the United States is on a little bit of a positive, because we're still having some sort of immigration.
You better clarify who's an illegal alien and who's not. I mean, you guys blanketly, it's the illegal aliens. Let's see, we've deported more illegal aliens in the Obama administration than we have in decades before, or any other current administration.
That's easy to say because more have come over.
I do. Well, but
yes.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
I disagree with you.
No.
The borders have been more porous under the Obama administration than ever before.
Who says?
Statistics. Go over to.
If you're going to say that, Rob,
yep.
Give me a stat for it rather than just a glancing generality. More people have come over to. No, 1 million Mexicans have gone back to Mexico because there are no jobs.
Correct, but we're not only talking Mexicans here. Okay, you got to remember there's a big influence of Eastern European people in this country, John, that you're not even throwing in the mix. So you're just easily pointing at Mexicans.
No.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. Don't get shitty with me.
I'll get any way I want.
Hold on. You two, hold on.
That's a defense, but the fact of it is, you have no facts to back up your.
And you don't either.
Come over.
You're just willing to ramble on and say, "Hey, my way is right," and you're wrong in this case. Now, if you want to get into statistics, we'll get into statistics.
How many people are coming over the border than you are? And in California, no. Well, maybe in Texas.
Well, the reason why I brought it up is a number of years ago there was a study found one of the only reasons the United States is on some sort of net positive population growth is because the illegal aliens and legal Mexicans generally have more children than the average American. So it's a first generation thing. Wait, would you please let me finish before you start running over me?
Hispanics here. What difference does it make?
Well, the reason why it matters is because before you cut me off was because of, you could say Catholicism, whatever. Generally, first generation people, especially the Mexicans, have more kids than the average white person. So they're having more kids. Population boom automatically means net positive.
And what's the stat for that, Jonathan? Do you know that to be a fact? They're having more kids?
Catholic Church themselves said that.
This is just off of what I heard. That was a stat a number of years ago, but generally it is because they don't. The Catholic Church doesn't believe in birth control.
Well, the current Catholic Church is starting to move more in the direction of birth control than it has ever before.
That's true. This Pope
This
is a lot more
Pope,
progressive than the past.
a lot more, and he's dealt with poverty in South America, and he knows, he has a pretty good background for it. I'm trying to get you a stat, so
But that
if
was
I'm a bit distracted.
that was the reason I brought that up, because you're right, because Japan's having a huge population net increase. According to what I've heard, within 30 years there'll be no Japanese. Take it or leave it. Don't know what I believe. I also think all this stuff is a first world problem.
Before Fukushima.
I also think a lot of this stuff is a first world problem because only first world countries have the ability to actually care about pollution and other things, because third world country people are too worried about starving to death than worried about pollution. Whether they should be or not, is an argument. But I doubt you're going to see somebody in, I don't know, Nicaragua really care about all the pollution they're putting in when they're just trying to get their family to eat food.
Well, that's how Jeb Bush lost it with a lot of, because he came out the other day totally in support of Hispanics, and that these are good people and we don't need to deport them and all that kind of stuff. And he had that quick low rise of Jeb Bush. No, not so much anymore, because he's married to a Hispanic woman, and he's bilingual, and a pretty turned on guy. But
I
thought it was a very interesting comment he stated.
I still think we're going to have a problem we need to sort out with immigration, because I know a number of legal first generation immigrants that really dislike Mexicans. They're picking on Mexicans because of the way they cross the border. My question is, how do you solve that? I know we've talked about it before, but I'm curious if you guys have. How do you solve? Because some people's thing is just open the tap and leave it open. Some people say do an Ellis Island. What do you guys think?
Well, how do you do an Ellis Island? I mean, I have to ask that question. What is doing an Ellis Island?
Well,
Just let them all in?
Well, because Ellis,
Well, your people that came over here, my people that came over here, went through Ellis Island, and and the histories
behind. The Chinese that came over here in 1849 went to Angel Island.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess
we had a problem with the number of Chinese, so by 1872 we passed the Chinese Exclusion Act that said don't send any more Chinese.
Well, my question is, how do you do it? Do you have a center that all of them come here, and then we say, okay, yes or no? Because some countries you have to have a skill. You have to have a skill set that we're looking for, we need. Some countries are very... In Ellis Island, if you were unhealthy, they sent your ass back up across the pond. So my question is, what do you do?
So now we're going to go into how do we solve the illegal alien issues?
Well, not solve it, but how do you alleviate? Because the problem with illegal immigration, and yes, I'm saying illegal immigrant or non-traditional immigrant, is
they're illegal.
Well, how do you solve it? I'm being politically correct. Is one, it's bad on them because they're getting taken advantage of.
You tell American business owners to not hire people if they don't have papers.
Your question is, you can't do that because you can't ask people are illegal or not.
You have to file an I-9 to get a job, John. You have to prove that you're a legal citizen to get a legal job in the United States.
Well,
forms you fill out.
The form you fill out tend to be more Social Security numbers, and many of these illegals just make up numbers, and nobody knows any different for a number of years. Restaurants are famous for that.
You know what that means? Whatever name and illegal number, and something tells me with computers, and considering that your military ID number is now your Social Security number, and all this kind of stuff. The wife of Mr. Buxton that owned the Buxton Wallet Company had the biggest Social Security account in the history of Social Security. His illegals came over, they found a Social Security card. They cleared the name. Nobody checked the numbers. Right. I can't think at this day and age that we're not checking for false. They issued the number, so they should know who the number is. They're all kind of fake IDs, and I hate to get argumentative about this, but I have been involved with it, know more about it than most people do. The problem is that the guys that hang around at Home Depot and the guys that hang around at every home improvement store, if you need help, you can pay them $10 an hour cash. It's done. You don't have to get sweaty. You don't have to get dirty, and it goes all the way up the food chain. As long, it's like, how do you get rid of the feral cats?
You
Get
shoot
rid of
them.
food.
Here's
We're talking humane ways to deal with situations, not shoot them. That is not the answer to everything, Jonathan.
well, I never said it was, but I think the problem
It
with,
might be for feral cats.
the problem with illegal immigration is it's very bad towards them. Besides what Americans may think, they get taken advantage of. There's sex trafficking. There has to be a way, a legal or a safe means to help them.
Now, what you really need to do is go to an immigration office and find out that most of the people, a great number of the people that work for INS and ICE are immigrants. A lot of them found jobs there.
First generation Americans in many cases, right?
Well, not even first generation immigrants. Period.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've filed documents and I've had them there just inhumane. To a person with regular business sensitivities, etc., just stupidly stringent and nitpicky. I mean, I had a girl's photographs turned down because she had very, very, very tiny gold ear studs on in the photograph. You had to use a magnifying glass to see them in the photograph. The INS person did that and said, "No, I can't accept this photo. We can't accept the package." That's a bit harsh. But
So-
at the end of the story, if you don't want illegals, don't pay them. Get people not to pay them.
Well, yeah, it's the old line of follow the money. I'm losing my voice here.
Unfortunately, that's never gonna happen.
Well, this is immigration is going to be an issue that we're going to talk about forever, and there's no easy answer either way. I mean, there really isn't. It is a difficult topic, and everybody has a different opinion on how to solve it.
Well, and you have the issue, and people don't think, somehow we personalize these things, that this illegal immigration issue is only an American issue. It's rampant throughout the EU because they admitted Eastern European countries like
Except for
Croatia.
Switzerland.
Right, exactly, and that's what I started out with. We're not only talking
Well,
Mexicans
there
here.
is, what was it, Switzerland?
The EU says if your country is a member of the EU, you can work in any other member country of the EU. Except the Brits don't want them, the French don't want them.
And I think
Oh, the French already have their own problems. They don't want them, but they've got them.
I think it was Switzerland. There's one of the small countries that basically said, "You're no longer welcome here, go away." And I guess the Swiss I think it was the Swiss, don't quote me on it, but they were really pissed, so they did something basically saying that no, you're no longer welcome to live here or work
There's
here.
certain
Switzerland's part of the EU.
Yeah, I don't think so. I know Austria also has a very, very tough immigration situation too, and
Even Mexico.
Germany's not particularly happy.
Like,
Well, even
look at-
Mexico
look at
does. You're right.
Mexico's immigration, if it was the United States, would be considered inhumane.
So what Mexico got has all of that South America people coming up through Mexico, and everybody from Chile on up.
Central American
Yeah.
people. Yeah. It would be difficult to become a Mexican. And as you well know, or your father well knows, an American citizen cannot own land in Mexico.
Guess what? They changed that. I have a friend that actually bought property in Mexico, and he owns it. The laws have changed.
He owns his place in Cabo.
Yeah.
But for years, you could buy a long-term lease. It was like
Correct.
a
It was a lease,
99-year
99-year lease. Right. That's no longer the case.
Too many Americans there in Cabo for it to be leased.
Yeah, no, he actually owns the property. It was a big hoop he had to go through, but yeah, he owns it. It's his. Because I asked him the same question: what did you go through to do this? And he told me the steps. He hired an attorney. They went through there, and he owns his property, and he's built a villa.
Here's
in
my
there.
question: can some Mexican politicians say that's a nice house? Get out.
You know what? That's the same thing that we've always said in the United States too. If we really wanted to, If the government really got in such a rule, you can tell anybody, get the hell
Yeah,
out.
but in America, I think it's a little harder. My question, you hear the
called-
stories about Mexico.
You
How easy
nationalize.
is
It's called nationalizing things. May it be, I'm going to take your power plant. I'm going to take your auto business. I'm going to take whatever in the name of the government.
I'm assuming in corrupt land known as Mexico. I'm always assuming it's a little easier to do than it would be here.
Everybody's corrupt. Everybody's corrupt. This country is corrupt. I'll tell you what, you like your Bay Bridge argument? I bet you if you look at the building of that Bay Bridge, there's corruption involved with that.
Well, yes, but I think Mexico's more corrupt.
So we bought the steel from China, which is part of the problem with the rusting cables, et cetera, on the Bay Bridge. And if it collapses, it just goes to show that we don't give an F anymore.
I guess not.
Because you go to the Hoover Dam, and that place was built to last for a couple hundred years. Built to last.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, the Hoover Dam's also still curing it for the last time I remember.
Well, yeah, it is.
That's
But,
the nature of concrete.
one of the issues was when I first started looking at the Bay Bridge and who got what contracts and things, it was so doggone confusing. And one of the engineers I know that works for Caltrans actually said it was a mistake for Caltrans to actually take this job on. It should have been an independent contractor taking it from the get-go and doing it right. He said there were so many things done wrong on the very beginning, right from the start, that it was next to impossible to straighten up.
I have heard the other problem with the Bay Bridge, and I don't know if this is true because I don't know much about it. I heard the couple of mayors in between the starting of it and the finishing of it. I guess the mayors were like, no, I want to change it. And I guess I've heard that caused problems. Don't know if it's
Anything's
true or
possible. But you know what? We've hit the hour mark here, and we don't want to go over too much. I want to thank all of you that have watched us live. And again, if you're watching us recorded, thank you very much. John Manjastic, thank you very much. Jonathan Charney, thank you very much. And this is Rob for Old Guy Tech TV, Opinion versus Opinion. We'll see you next week. Give us a call. Thanks.